And this is Desiree from HomWork and an Empowered Woman. And welcome to HomWork Live, when every Tuesday at noon, we interview someone who's part of our process of growing and launching HomWork. So good afternoon, Patrick. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on today.
Thank you. So you're Patrick Calderon Jenkins, and you are the founder of Crowdco.
Yes,
And if you were one of the first crowdfunding platforms.
that's correct.
Tell us. That's big. That's huge. What got you involved in that? How did you jump on the bandwagon so fast?
Well, I actually was prior to getting into crowdfunding, I was running a social media. I was basically the head of the social media marketing for film studio, independent film studio, and that basically opened me into space that I was very curious to explore, which was the just traditional, social media marketing and e-commerce. And I was approached by a few startups that basically decided, brought me into helping them with their Kickstarter campaign. And that's kind of how I fell into the space. And I fell in love with the whole crowdfunding model. I realized the potential that people had but didn't have in the past, because you always had to depend on a middleman to get to the consumer. And this was basically one of the fastest ways to get in front of your audience and make a huge impact, not only on the funding side, but also testing your ideas, testing the model, doing a lot of the market research that would cost you a lot of money. So there's all of those different elements that basically got me really excited about it. And also the fact of how you tell the story to an audience that is going to be, responding to that idea or startup or anything, and it really gets you to understand what's working, what's not working. So that's the story in essence.
And I think that's really important that you mentioned that, because that in itself is a lot of value, and it helps entrepreneurs or people that already have a project, before going way into and investing an exorbitant amount of money, be able to find what their blind spots may be. And you don't find that out unless you get that feedback from your consumers. So it's better sooner than later. So in your definition, it's now crowdfunding. Some people are still unclear as to what it was. How would you define crowdfunding?
Well, basically, crowdfunding is bringing your idea in front of thousands or millions of people and asking them for their support in order to make that idea come to reality. And in exchange, what you give them is you could give them something a reward base, which could be like an iPhone case, for example, or an equity piece of it, which just started recently, and basically allows you to raise equity to a huge amount of backers, investors that would be able to get your idea off the ground.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. So crowdfunding has a certain key component elements that makes it work and doesn't work. Because there's some of the crowdfunding campaigns you see that barely makes the 10,000, 20,000. Yet there's these other ones that are making millions of dollars. Would you say that's really contributed primarily on their product, or is it primarily on how their audience, or actually how they actually worked their crowdfunding campaign?
Well, I think it both. You definitely want to make sure that your value proposition is very unique, doesn't exist in the space. But you also want to make sure that most of the work that is going to get you funded and successfully launched is going to be happening months before the actual campaign goes live. The reason for that is when you go, there's been a belief that it's eventually fading out, but a lot of people would used to come to Kickstarter when it started to become very popular, thinking that they would launch their project on Kickstarter and get funded and have a ton of press and have a lot of money and make things happen. And then they realized that it was a lot of the work, heavy lifting had to happen before that, where you would have to build your audience, understand what sort of key messages would be the ones that are going to be performing the best, how you're going to position your project in a way that is going to engage the audience instantly. So that value proposition, that story angle, needs to be really thought out in a way that you will capture anybody that is only going to be on your site for maybe 15 seconds at the most. So you really need to work on those things.
So what we see looks really easy. We see this video, we see the campaign, we see the perks, we think that we see the money, but it takes a lot prepping prior to that. You said up to months, sometimes 2 or 3 months prior to. the setup prior to make it better.
We've worked on campaigns that even have more than that. The more time you can work on the pre-campaign, the better, because it allows you to really engage a stronger audience. So basically, from the email perspective, most of the people that are going to come in on day one will be people that you have on your email list. So those people are going to be potential backers, people that want to either get your product, they want your idea made, they are engaged in the story, in the vision for the campaign, and they are going to be the initial people that will push your project over that 30% funding goal, which would eventually get you into that momentum. Ideally, in the best case scenario, what we want to do is we want to accomplish you getting funded on day one or even on the first week. Because then not only will you be able to get into the validation, the public validation, the story that makes a much stronger, compelling argument as for other people that have no idea what your startup is or who you are. If they see there's a public validation because your campaign got funded or is on track to, it's already 40 or 50% on day one or on the first week, that is telling people that there's something behind that idea. So that initial momentum is key. And that's where the pre-campaign stage is so important.
Okay, so those are the important components. Some people have tried to do it on their own, and other people work with companies like yourself, like Crowdfund, that are project managing the project, which I think is number one importance. Just like trying to build a house on your own. Unless you do it over and over again, it's not going to be the same. And then there's a budget that you need to allow for that, not only for your services as your project manager, but also for your social media and some other things, video and other things. Can you mention the different areas they're going to need funding for, and approximately what that should be, and approximately how much of a budget they should? Because then I'm going to ask you about how you've been talking with us as far as some creative ways of being able to enter it without everything at one point. And then another thing is that I'm going to run real quickly because I just got a notification that my battery is running low. So audience, continue talking, Patrick. I'm going to run and charge myself in so we don't run out, okay? I'll take it away for a moment, okay?
Basically, I think one of the key components of making sure that you have a budgeted plan for the crowdfunding campaign is that you want to make sure that you need, if there's a budget for ads, we always recommend having at least 10% spend of the funding goal that you're going to ask in the end to make it work. And for that to happen, what you want to make sure is that the funding goal that you're gonna look for is going to be a funding goal that is going to get you to the minimum viable idea of what the startup is about. So you don't want to ask for a huge amount of money initially that will get you over 2 years burnout, like the expenses for the marketing, for the team, for everything. What you want to make sure that you get is the initial funds that will get you your idea started. And from there, you work on different internal goals that will get you, which we usually call them stretch goals. So on the budget sense, when you work with agencies like us, my recommendation and what I always prefer is that the clients that we work with are very engaged as well in the idea. Because in the end, this is their vision. So it would be like an entrepreneur passing on the idea of their company to somebody that has experience running a startup, but doesn't have the clear vision and the clear purpose. So this is kind of like a red flag for an investor, right? An investor wouldn't invest in an entrepreneur that has not the engagement or commitment to make it happen. So we always ask that commitment. So in terms of time from startups to work with us, we want to make sure that they are engaged with the process. What we do and what we bring to the table is that we bring a lot of the experience over 7 years working with over 300 startups. And that experience has led us to understand things that are going to work really well. Like you want to make sure that you have a website, a landing page that is going to get you enough optimized conversions for emails. So building a good landing page, having good pictures that make you look very professional into somebody that has no idea who you are important elements that we need to make it happen. And I guess that's more or less the overall budget perspective. Hopefully we didn't get disconnected.
I'm sorry, I want to make sure that he's still with us and that this information that you do not miss. So I'm going to make sure I call Patrick and make sure he gets back on. So sorry for that, ladies and gentlemen, but this information is valuable, so hopefully it'll be worth your time and make sure that he is with us. We've been speaking with Patrick from CrowdCo. And there you go.
Hi, where did you guys leave me?
So sorry, so sorry.
I'm talking and it went dark, so I wasn't sure if you were there. I was just continuing to talk.
I'm so sorry. I spent so much time prepping for this, and then I didn't notice that. But anyway,
Don't worry.
so we were sharing and I was sharing with the community is that how important it is to know that it's a budget to really do it effectively. There's a budget that's involved. And that does determine the success. And then if so, what that budget includes. And I know it can range from high to low, just depending on what you're trying to get accomplished. But most importantly, the fact that there is one. But you were kind enough to suggest some ways that we could get started, like a pre-launch to our launch. I thought was ingenious. So could you kind of just repeat again what the budget should include and what that should be, but then how some other ways they can work into this?
Yeah, so basically, you want to incorporate is you want to bring the visual aspect of the campaign to look as professional and appealing as possible. So for that to happen, you want to make sure that you have a really good optimized landing page, optimized for conversions for email signups. You want to make sure that you have a very strong video page that is going to be compelling enough, engaging, and interesting for the audience. You want to make sure that your crowdfunding page, if it's a reward base or if it's an equity base, is informative, but it's also very visually for the visual people, because a lot of people will just go to your site, they won't spend much time, so you really want to make sure that you capture them in that instant. And then everything that you would need on the back end, which is all of the market research, the testing, the implementation of different strategies, which is basically part of the strongest piece of the pre-campaign. And this is one of the things that are going to take the most, is understanding all that data and putting it into a very organized setup for the project. Then you would also, if you are able to allocate funds for ads, we usually recommend having 10% of the total funding goal, assuming the total funding goal is going to be the minimum viable money you need. So the minimum viable product, or basically the funding you need to get the minimum viable product. That's what you want to focus on for the funding goal. And then from that, I would recommend 10% of that. So
say, for example, someone wanted to raise 100,000.
Yes, so then it would be 10% of that.
Okay.
That would be for ads. And it doesn't mean that you're going to spend $10,000. It just means that if we see that the ads are performing, they're being, that you're seeing a good return on your investment, then we should basically reinvest into those ads and continue growing your reach. You only have about, usually in terms of the duration, which is also another important piece of the crowdfunding campaign, is a lot of people ask us, well, how long should my campaign last? And in the equity side, it's a much longer window because you're raising funds in a different method than what you would do in the reward base. In the reward base, I would work on a 30 to 45 day window. 30 days is the ideal because it keeps the attention pretty big. After the 35 days, you start seeing a decline in that. So anything over that is just overkill. So in that short amount of time, if you have an ad spend that is going to get you, let's say organically and with press, you were able to get over, your funding goal was $100,000, you make $120,000. Then what would happen is that if this is your trajectory to get to that $120,000, with the ads, you would basically be able to put it, just push it up, and that's kind of like the goal of the ads. Things that work really well with ads are press articles. So if you can get some good press articles prior to your launch or in the very initial state, week of the campaign launch, that you can use and use it into creating ads that are going to give you even more validation with somebody that doesn't know. So for example, if Mashable wrote about your startup and we want to use that article and say Mashable loves your startup, and then show like the image, and then you have a click, and you really make it a stronger, compelling reason. So the PR is another strong piece of the element, and this is another valuable service that we offer here at Crowdfund. We want to make sure that when you reach out to writers, that you're reaching out to them with a very specific reason as to why we feel that this story would be valuable for them. You're not going to be, the last thing you want to do is spam a writer, because then you're killing your opportunities to even make any relationships in the future with them. So that's one of the things that we're always trying to make sure that we get those writers and we build those relationships for our startups moving forward.
And so you mean ads, you mean like Facebook ads, and what other kind of ads do you recommend?
Yes, Facebook ads, Google ads. It really depends on your product.
Okay.
And where you're, where you see a stronger impact for that. Another element, there's so many verticals in terms of
I know it sounds so easy, but the thing is that when they know to do it right, there's all these things that are important to know about and to take.
Like affiliate. There's a huge opportunity if you have a very strong affiliate opportunity for backers to basically make some money by referring friends, or they have 1 million followers on Instagram. So, you could find ways to make a deal with them where they're making money from driving traffic and driving backers to you, and you give them a percentage of whatever they can bring in. Everything would be trackable. So, that's one of the great things about crowdfunding, is that everything is really trackable. You know exactly how much money each thing is making for you. So that also allows you to optimize your marketing efforts and understand after your crowdfunding is over, that all of that data is also going to be super valuable for you, regardless if you're looking to do, future venture capital fundraising, or you're planning on going straight to your website or going to retailers. This data and this information is going to allow you to raise whatever valuation you have and get a realistic figure of what you expect in terms of sales based on this initial approach.
And I've heard that there's certain, you set an amount, and that you want to be able to accomplish that, at least a percentage of that right away. And then sometimes there's some platforms that if you don't reach that amount, then you don't get any of the funding. And if you do, you need to reach that amount, that threshold, before you're able to obtain the funding. So you'd be able to advise a person which way is best, and even what was the reasonable amount to start with. It's always easier to go over, but you don't want to go under. And that also factors in, when you mentioned taking this information to investors or to the next level, that's going to be important in that point too. If they feel you can't even wasn't able to raise your 20,000, 30,000, or 100,000, whatever your goal was, then that's not as encouraging it would be if you were to exceed that. So you gave me some philosophy or some ideas on how we should pace that.
Yes. It's all about, if you think about it, you want to map your success not only on the crowdfunding success, but on the next stages. So making sure that you're asking funding price or the funding goal, we would basically be able to do all of the due diligence before we get started and give you an educated idea of what the funding goal is based on what we've found in the market space, as well as, like if there's any competitors that probably did a fundraise in the past, how they performed, what was the kind of like the magic number for them.
And that's going to be huge, because again, some people, they don't know. And that's also based on your community too. Like in addition to your ads and your PR budget, who do you have access to as far as your email list, or what alignments or affiliates that your joint ventures are you creating to be able to bump that, give it more substantial?
I agree.
And then also what was really curious, what I had never heard, is that you talked about a pre-launch to the launch. to sometimes people, like, for example, I say we have a great community, but maybe we haven't communicated with them in a while. So we kind of need to warm them up, or we need to be able to see who's going to raise their hands for what we're doing. So you had some great suggestions on how.
Yeah, I mean,
share one.
It's like the elections, right?
Yeah,
you want to educate people who your candidate is and what they need to do and which day they have to go and vote. So getting that anticipation and the excitement, and everybody really wants to make this work. So it's you really kind of have to. I think I even wrote some time ago, kind of like making a big party. You want to make this hype about your launch in the biggest way possible, but also keep people, very have an understanding of what crowdfunding is. When I started crowdfunding, the concept of crowdfunding was still not really clear. People, you would tell them they would launch on Indiegogo and Kickstarter, and they would be like, "What? What is that?" Now it's become much more mainstream. Especially Kickstarter has been a little bit more mainstream. Indiegogo is huge in terms of in the hardware and in the film side and technology now. So both, it depends on where you go, and then you have the equity side, which is also starting to grow huge in the U.S.
So as of recently, there's now lots and lots of different crowdfunding platforms. Did you still choose Kickstarter and Indiegogo? Why?
Those are, when back in 2007, there was, I believe, over 500 crowdfunding platforms of different types, but the ones that eventually had basically they were able to really stabilize the market. The platform itself is really good. When you consider a crowdfunding platform, there's a few things that you want to consider, which is the fees that the crowdfunding platform is going to take. If your product is a good fit. Right now, both Kickstarter and Indiegogo have a really good, you can really launch your product or idea on both and have a similar success. Kickstarter has more traffic on a monthly basis, but it doesn't mean that you'll have reach, you have access to that people. Indiegogo is a much more friendly for project owners and us as well. We've been partners with them for, I would say, over 4 or 5 years. And what we've learned is that having a direct relationship with Indiegogo community and the Indiegogo team and the specialists allows us to really make sure that we leverage the most of the platform. So, we understand how to get into and stay in the top of the popular projects, for example. That allows us to get featured on their newsletters. It allows us to get featured on their homepages, which basically drives thousands of dollars of pledges that, if we would have launched it on Kickstarter, we wouldn't have had the same effect. Because Kickstarter is a little bit more, it's a little bit harder to get in contact with the team at Kickstarter. They didn't have that same approach, which is one of the things I'm more of a lover of Indiegogo than Kickstarter for that particular reason.
Now, have you seen one more favorable for male or female projects?
There's actually, Indiegogo has a stronger female-driven project. So there's more female projects where female founders are the ones that are running the projects than with Kickstarter. Kickstarter tends to be a little more male-driven. Indiegogo has been a little bit more balanced, which is great,
And then what about for products? I see a lot of products, technology, gadgets, things of that type. What about service? Like our HomWork is live where you work where you live, anywhere in the world. So we are creating live workspaces for women professionals and entrepreneurs. So they're real estate background. It's a real estate play, but also it's co-sharing, co-living, co-working. So how would that fare on Indiegogo campaign? Like, would that just be successful if I had a new pocketbook or widget?
Well, I think the question whether you have I think you could have an idea, which would be a service startup. It could be a product startup. It could be a software startup. The question that you need to ask yourself is whether you have a strong enough audience that is going to be able to get you that initial funding. So you could choose to launch it on Indiegogo. You can choose to launch it on Kickstarter. And the real answer to that success is if we have that engaged community. So again, it's going back to the pre-campaign. But I think, both platforms work really well. With Indiegogo, you have the differences is there's a lot of differences actually. With Kickstarter, it's an all or nothing. So that means that if you don't get to your funding goal, the project doesn't get made. The money goes back to the backers, and that's it. You have access. You still keep access to the backers who initially supported you. So there's an opportunity there to do a relaunch or keep engaged with that community. With Indiegogo, you have the option to go with the flexible funding. So the flexible funding allows you to get any funds that you make in the end for a higher percentage in fees. And they also allow you to extend your campaign. So if you see that your campaign is lagging, and it's about to end, you could extend it up to I think a total of 45 days total. So if you have 30 days, you can extend it to 15 more days. And eventually, if you see that you can get that momentum, you can get funded. So that's a really cool advantage of that. The other thing is you can go into continuing taking pre-orders. So if your startup or idea is still not in a place that you're going to be able to get the product made, but you can still take pre-orders, then you can do that with Indiegogo.
And so one more thing, rewards. How important or how critical is that to the success of your project? Are people really are they doing it for the rewards? Or they're really just doing it to support you? What are your thoughts on that?
It depends. I guess your reward, if it's a reward-based, you definitely want to make sure that your rewards are going to be, there's a strong reason why people would want to get that reward. So if it's a product and you're doing like an iPhone case, you want to make sure that you offer that case and at a pricing that's going to work. If it's for, let's say it's a strong cause and you're not giving away the actual product, but maybe you're selling something from your sponsors or from partners that, or even like handmade products from Guatemala, and you're supporting a Guatemalan sustainable community. So you want to tie the rewards to the idea of the crowdfunding campaign.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, it does. So you use the phrase, make your crowdfunding campaign the best party ever. Is that how it is?
Yes.
How you said. So tell us how that's going to happen, and tell us more about you offering a whole webinar for those who want to know more. We could talk about this forever, but there's a lot of information that you have and to share. So share us how we can make that the best party ever in conclusion, and then tell us about what you're offering.
So basically, I think one of the things that I enjoy doing with startups is I love understanding what your concept is and where you're heading. And sometimes where you're heading might not be as clear as what your concept is. So for us, getting in that journey to make that vision happen and make it compelling enough for people to get excited about it is something that I'm very passionate about. And in this webinar, what I wanted to offer and what I wanted to share is the knowledge that I've been getting over the past 7 years working with startups. So I would be able to give you guys examples of startups that did really tremendously well with our support and what they needed, what we did for them, and what they can use for your own startup and make it great.
So we're sharing that information, that webinar information in our Facebook feed, and we'll share it in our post, email, and so forth. But the dates and the time, all you do is click. It's free, and it's on the 16th, I believe. What's the date and time?
Yeah, I think it's 2 p.m. East Coast time on the 16th or 17th.
16th. Okay, so all the details will be in our write-ups and things of that type. So in closing, Patrick, thank you again so much for your time and expertise. What would you like to leave our listeners with today?
My pleasure. I think keep your dreams going and don't get discouraged. There's a lot of opportunity in this space, and all you need to do is kind of push it and make it happen.
Great. Well, thank you. And again, I really advise everybody to take the time and to contact Patrick below, because again, it gave us a lot of insight as far as whether we were ready or not ready, and if not, how to get ready, and then a lot of alternatives, the way to be able to start with a pre-launch or a launch. And it's just, to make it really successful, there's some work that has to go into it. And it's a lot of fun, it's exciting, and it's definitely a great way to be able to help fund your business. So contact Patrick at crowdco.com and sign up for the webinar. And more information about HomWork is go to www.homwork.com. And that's HomWork.com. So remember, take care, and until we meet again, live where you work where you live, anywhere in the world.
Thank you. This is
Thank you. Broadcast.